What's up? We're here with another spotlight, and this time we're talking about director Denis Villeneuve. You may know that he's directing an upcoming Dune movie, but we're going to start with his first film that we've seen, which is Prisoners. Um, this movie stars Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Terrence Howard also plays a pretty good role in it.
Terrence Howard, Viola Davis, and Paul Dano as well.
Yeah, Paul, oof, he was killer in that film. Um, But let's get into it. Nick, what are your thoughts on this movie and when you first saw it versus how it like sits with you now?
I've always heard so much about Prisoners that, and like when I went into it, I was just like, okay, I was like, yeah, this is probably going to be like good or whatnot, just based on what I've heard. But I really just did not expect it to go the way that it did, or for it to feel the way. Because I was like, okay, all of this is going to be spoilers. But like the kids are missing. I was like, okay, I've seen this a few times on Criminal Minds or whatever. But like really just great handling of the whole just the way he first the way he shot the suburbs is excellent. I loved the feel of the area. I love how he managed to make it feel like this really haunting and like ominous place. And like um I don't know, like I just love the way like it just looked, first of all, which I guess is part to him, and I think it was Roger Deakins who did the cinematography. He also like handled a really crazy talented cast. Really, I mean, Viola Davis, Gyllenhaal, Jackman should have been nominated for an Oscar, by the way. It's insane he didn't, but that's
He
another
should have won.
discussion. It's another discussion. I just it's just really cool that, in like, I know he was making films before this, but like at least for what we've seen, it's really cool that this was his like quote unquote starting point, because none of his films after resemble this in the slightest, which is just really cool that like you have that variety and you're still able to like hit that like high level of success every time. Like I love Martin Scorsese, but like a lot of his films operate in that like gangster, genre or whatever. Not that that's a bad thing. He knows what he can do well, but it's like to see him like Villeneuve like jump from like this crime thriller to this psychological like aspect of enemy to like, and like so forth, to like all the way to Blade Runner of all things. It's like really cool to see like that this was his start with this really tightly put together crime thriller. Um, I think he just really has a good eye for like keeping everything focused, and like everyone and everything around like just in focus. He did a really good job directing. That's all I'll say. I'll hand it off to you.
I know for me, what stands out is the both the visual way he shoots films. He's really good at using empty space to create sort of this tension. He's the way he shoots. Like, there are two scenes that stick out to me. One, the final scene, which we'll get into in a second, because I think it's one of my favorite endings of a movie uh, ever, really. But the one scene, I think probably the one they should have shown when Hugh Jackman should have gotten his Oscar, at least nomination, probably a win for that role, is when he's slamming the hammer on the sink, interrogating Paul Dano's character. Um, that was like next level, man. The way it's just the shot, and it's just watching Hugh Jackman slowly descend into madness, and it's just seeing him. Is he going to keep his cool? Is he going to lose it? And boom, he hits it on the side, and you're like, oh my god, he is going crazy. Like, there is no line that this man is not willing to cross. Um, and it's just the way that he can do that with a simple shot. He doesn't need to overextend. He doesn't need to get fancy with the camera. He uses the camera to tell the story without making it distracting. And I think some directors try to get so fancy with camera work that they sometimes lose emotion because of it. That's why Fincher is so great, for example, because he knows sometimes simplicity is the best way to go. I think Villeneuve is really good at that as well.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, I just want to add on to that because like I just thought of that scene where he's showing Viola Davis and Terrence Howard like photos and like they're in the one room and Hugh Jackman's like off to the side. Like again, like I think like basically like simplicity was like he doesn't really get fancy, but it is in of that like keeping its base going to basics method that makes his like style stand out because like you just see he knows what he's doing as such a command over like the camera and like he knows he has control over his environment and like I know that scene in particular it's just you have Hugh Jackman like waiting to hear the news or like he has like an idea of like what will happen and you see Viola Davis and Terrence Howard like break down and there with Jake Gyllenhaal and it's just like so much storytelling unfolds in like 30 seconds with like and with one frame like one shot and just he has great command over what he's doing.
it's amazing, and that final scene, dude, is so beautiful. As it speaks to it, it kind of feels so satisfying because you don't feel for Hugh Jackman's character. You know, you feel sad that he's stuck, he's trapped there for life. Um, and Jake Gyllenhaal is so close to finding where he is, but at the same time, it feels right, right? Because the stuff that Hugh Jackman does is just so messed up that you can't reward that guy. You know, he's beyond redemption, but yet there is hope. And I think that's that balance in storytelling that he tells really well visually with how he shoots above, then to down below. That really I think is impactful. This is one of the films I'm writing a short right now, and this is one of the inspirations I'm using. I really think it's a masterpiece that everyone should watch. Well, as long as you're old enough. If you're too young, it may be a little much for you, but I think it's really amazing filmmaking. But Nick, is there anything else you want to say about this film before we move on?
Yeah, I'm all set.
All right, let's move on to Enemy. Now, this is the one film of Villeneuve I haven't seen, so Nick, we're going to lean on you. Break down what you thought of Enemy.
Enemy is insane. it's so quiet and so understated, and yet it's so insane. And again, like he made both of these released in 2013, or at least Prisoners, or at least Enemy was like festival release or whatnot. The fact he made both of these back to back is unreal because these two films are not alike in any regard. It's like this is Villeneuve's most out there film. This is his most like art house, like weird, like um, you know, this film's ending to I guess to not spoil it for you, like it's it's one of the few times a movie I've like it's ended and I was like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but I know something really good happened. Just going off that feeling and it's like it was produced by A24, which already should like inform people like where it's gonna go. And but it's so well done. Again, he visually it's a kind of this movie in particular is kind of reminiscent of Fincher in some ways, like the way he uses like shadows and muted lighting. But there's also like this really like I don't know, like creepy like tension that like he carries over from Prisoners really well. He gets such a great dual performance out of Jake Gyllenhaal. Um, and again he just visually I love the way he shot this. It's so just uneasy, it's so like unnerving, and he manages to like the way he managed to switch genres and in some ways format so effectively is just really impressive. And our next film is going to be Sicario, which exists in a whole other realm from Enemy. And yeah, just again, just to see like the versatility of like genre and like the way I think it goes to that he really he makes certain to understand his characters. Like he makes certain to understand like Hugh Jackman's father role, Jake Gyllenhaal's dual role, and he's from there like he's able to craft crazy stuff around it. And I think that's what's really makes him effective. I'm not sure how many of the films we'll be talking about he like contributed to the writing, but I know that he's just able to bring out so much from his characters, and he does so particularly here that just I think makes his genre hopping so effective and notable.
Yeah, let's move on to his next film if you don't have anything else about Enemy. Sicario. This was his first film of his that I saw. I think I saw it in theaters. Benicio del Toro, Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, three heavyweights of acting. Um, what were your thoughts, Nick, when you first saw it, and what really stood out from the film?
That for that, I guess it's the only one, but that extraction scene on the highway, one of the best executed moments of like tension and foreboding I've ever seen. Like he outdid like so many other horror films like that, like traffic in tension, like the way he and like that was his biggest setup yet. That was his whole like just like you went from like you got the contained rooms of enemy and prisoner to like you got a full highway, multiple cars, you got multiple parties, multiple characters, and again he just handled it so well. And I think it goes back to what I said, like he makes certain to understand his characters and how to bring out like the best in them, like through the actors, that makes like all of this still feel the same. There's that same level of tension from like enemy and prisoners, but it's in such a different situation and format. Um, Again, looks beautiful. Granted, he worked again with Roger Deakins, so props to him as well. But um, yeah, that highway scene is just perfection. I love that scene so much. I think also that the opening scene between Emily Blunt and Daniel Kaluuya when they're like going into a house and then like bomb goes off or something, like that was just another great, like you don't know like what's happening, but like that like the characters are like in danger or whatever. It's um just really great. You just he knows his environment, he knows his characters so well, and I love Sicario. Sicario might be my favorite film of 2015, if I'm being honest. It was just a great executed crime thriller and just a great like tension piece overall. Like you feel uncertain as you're like going through it all.
Yeah, I know for me, there were a few things that stood out. I think the opening scene, I love the Star Wars used to do this all the time, is the opening scene is the hero in action. And it's really great. And I think that scene, especially for setting the tone, the tone is so consistent, and it really helps. That highway scene, I can't agree with you enough. That scene is awesome. It gets recommended on my YouTube recommendations way too much, and I watch it every time, which is probably why it's still there. It's that good. It, Everything about this film's amazing. He brings out great performances. Normally, an actor's best performance is in one of his films, which says something about how he is as directing for actors. And I think the way it's shot, the kind of dark. He always tells dark stories. Let's be honest. There's one common thing. Different genres, yes, but there's a dark sense to his storytelling. He doesn't tell smile, happy ever after rom coms. That's not his thing. Um, but I think this film really was what brought him into the mainstream, where people are like, "This dude is the filmmaker." You know what I mean? He is the guy that we need on our next project. And I really thought that was next level. So let's go on to his next project, which is a massive film, Arrival. Nick, what were your thoughts when you first saw Arrival? Whether it's performances, story, let us know what you think.
First, that I sat in silence for like a solid. I didn't watch this in theaters, unfortunately, but like I sat in silence for like 5 minutes, like in front of my computer, like in shock after this film. I was just like, wow, that was nothing like I was expecting, and I got like such a again his films are such great character pieces and they're such great tension pieces. Those are the two words. Like if I'm when I walk when we end this episode, and like those are the two films I'm going to be like forever using. Like he just great character pieces. He knows how to like just extract so much from his actors and how to like just shoot them in a way that brings out so much. And Arrival is no different. Again, I have to say I love his color palette. He's switched. I don't know if Deakins shot this or how much he had in the visual like elements, but this film looks very beautiful. Again, there's such a great natural like feel to it. Um, and even like going to his like use of like he jumped from three like natural gritty like thrillers to a whole sci-fi adventure with aliens, and it still got a Best Picture nod. He still got Best Director nod as he should have. And again, just in the way I think at the end, like he's just I think he's just so confident in what he does, and he knows what he wants, that he's able to just jump back and forth from everything. I don't know, like to go any deeper would make it an arrival review. We're supposed to be spotlighting Villeneuve, but I don't know. He just did such a great job. Like for it's one of the best sci-fi films I think of the past decade for sure. That rightfully not got nominated for Best Picture. So I don't know. I think it just it's just it's a great film. He utilizes the environment so well. This is all. That's another thing too. He knows his environment inside. He knows the like the border at Sicario really well. He knows the city where Jake Gyllenhaal lives in Enemy. He knows the small suburb Prisoners takes place. He knows that is just as good as his characters, and I think that's why he's able to like bring out the town or setting so well. Similar with the spaceship and like the military setup in this movie.
I think for me, there are a couple of things that stand out. One, and the most importantly, the thing that was the most difficult part to pull off, learning an alien language interesting. And he makes it fascinating. Every time you were in that part of the ship and the ink comes out on the screen and they're taking down notes, there's just this feeling of intrigue and tension and what's going to happen. What is this relationship? He is making you ask all of these questions, and the way he structures the film, the way he shoots the film, he makes them you ask these questions at the right time. And I think that's a really important thing, because it really helps progress his narrative and it really pushes the story forward in an interesting way, and it keeps the momentum. You know what I mean? Those scenes don't work. All of a sudden, it's kind of a clunky film. It slows. Get the common complaint that most films struggle with. It slows down in the middle too much. This film, he has a way of bridging scene to scene and making everything interesting, everything layered. Um, and he combines in a way that I'm really excited for Dune. He combines spectacle with character. It's a massive spectacle film, but it's also a really intimate story about Amy Adams' character. And I think that's what makes this film so beautiful to me. And I think that's what really stands out about him is his balance of spectacle and intimacy with character. Um, and just I can't say enough about him, man. The dude's an amazing director. Let's move on to the last film of his we saw. This was not a financial success by any means, but I think it's one that was successful with critics. This stars Ryan Gosling, Harrison Ford, Blade
Jeremy,
Runner 2049.
right?
Jared Leto, yeah, yeah.
Jared Leto, Ana de Armas, Ford, Gosling. That was the core quartet.
But Nick, what were your thoughts when you first saw this film? And has your perspective changed, or is it kind of the same still?
I always loved this movie. Like when I first saw it, I think saw it relatively recently. Actually, saw it right for the first time when quarantine first began. I Again, I think Blade Runner 2049. It's his biggest film by far, at least until Dune. Like this story is like I think his longest. There's so much different components. This is his first also like franchise film. If anything, like he's technically it's a sequel. So, but again, it still feels like Villeneuve's film. Like he had arguably had a harder job here because he had to like maintain what Ridley Scott did in the original while still putting forth his presence in the story, and like he managed to strike that balance I think really well. It still felt like a Blade Runner movie, but also I could see so much of Villeneuve's like capabilities. Again, the characters of like Ryan Gosling's Kay, or even Harrison Ford's Rick Deckard, who's introduced literally in the third act. All of them still feel so like well drawn out, and like so like they are truly at the center of the movie. They are his priority. And again, his usage of CGI is only a step up from Arrival, which was really good in my opinion. And then here, he's got all these crazy new environments, all these new like tech and setups. Um, it's just a really cool film. It's a really also just I think really smart and underrated film from what was it 2017, and it's I don't know he leaves his imprint really well on all of it. Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford are truly at the center of it. The fact that Harrison Ford alone, again, he's introduced in like the beginning of the end of the second act ish, and like he still managed to have like a go through a whole character arc and still feel so fully formed is just I think a tribute to how Villeneuve like just again knows who's in the film and knows who's playing them. And yeah, just again visually, I'm coming to realize now, as we're talking this out, Villeneuve likes to use the color like dark, like color gray a lot, but he also manages to make it look so beautiful, which is just great. Like enemy is like coated in like this weird yellow gray mix, and it looks like haunting and beautiful. Like, and that's another thing too. He just visually, he knows what he's doing, no matter if it's like on film or if he's shooting with CGI.
I know for me, a couple things stand out. One, shout out to Roger Deakins for this film. The cinematography is amazing. Whoever was the colorist on this film, the color grade is epic. I mean, just the visual aesthetics of this film is great and really immersive. And I think it really embraces what the first film, the first Blade Runner, I should say, does, and then takes it to another level. And I think that's what makes this film really interesting. I love the opening scene with Dave Bautista and Ryan Gosling. It's just it seems like he's such a good handle on action and making it so interesting. Dave Bautista in that little scene, dude, like that's his best performance. I'm gonna be honest. It's a really good performance in a single scene. Um, and I'm really a big fan of this film. I would say my biggest critique is I think the runtime's too long. I think that's one of the reasons it wasn't financially one of there are multiple reasons why this wasn't financially successful, which we won't get into because this isn't the producer's business class. But it's a little long and it feels like it meanders maybe a little bit too much. I think those are the only two things that you could consider real weaknesses of this film. But otherwise, I think everything's really fascinating. I think Ryan Gosling does an amazing job. And never once do I question, is this a real world? It feels real. Um, and it's just, it shows that he's how good he is at adapting to work. And I think between this film, Sicario, and really all of his other films, it really proves what's to come. But is there anything else you want to cover about Blade Runner before we get into the
No,
last part?
I'm all set. That
Yeah. So let's just talk for a second about why he makes so much sense to be the director of Dune. Um, I think for me, we'll just go back and forth. The first thing for me that stands out is his handle of spectacle and intimacy. Dune's a really intimate story with Paul Atreides, who's played by Timothy Chalamet, but the spectacle of the story, the scale of everything is so massive. But I think he could really balance that. But let's talk more in general. What else do you think that really stands out from Villeneuve from all these films that you think is what he'll put into Dune?
sorry, bit of a lag there. I feel like in some ways he's become like it makes sense because like he knows how he's like the new what's his name, like Peter Jackson in a way. Like we've said to each other a few times that this is like it could be the new like Lord of the Rings type thing. And like what worked about Lord of the Rings, going off what I've read because I haven't admittedly seen all of them just yet, but it was the fact that this was one of the biggest stories ever told, but it never felt that the characters were lost in it, which is something that like sometimes I feel like with certain like Star Wars films, you could arguably throw that like critique at them, but like what worked about the original Star Wars or George Lucas or like Lord of the Rings, the characters managed to keep up with the insane scale of the story. And we've seen like he has the handle on the characters and just going from Prisoners all the way to Blade Runner. he is more than adept to handle the scope, and now he's dealing with what could be quite possibly the most talented cast on the planet, just a like collective group, and now you're dealing with also the thing that inspired Star Wars. So like, I think in some ways this is like this is it. This is the moment that like film people know when you say like Denis Villeneuve is a good director. Film people know that statement is legit, and now this is the point where everyone else is gonna believe it as well. Just putting Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, and Jason Momoa on a movie, I think is gonna bring in a lot more like non like film like cinephile people to watch Dune, and this is I think this is gonna be it. This is the moment everyone's gonna like realize. And again, he the reoccurring theme throughout all of this is that he knows his characters. He goes out of his way to make sure he can present them in the best possible way. And we know now that he's like just worked his way up to scope, like to work handle large scope really well. So I have no problems. Like like you said, it makes sense that he's directing Dune, and it's just really crazy that the guy who made Enemy, this really small A24 whacked out like psychological film, is now directing what is going to be what has been the most anticipated project 2 years in a row now since it got pushed. So it's just real. This is one of the craziest. This is probably the craziest career evolution I've seen, other than like Adam Driver, and both of them have kind of like unfolded in the same time, like the 2012 like to now, just to see where like they started, and now like they're in these massive projects. It's so crazy to watch and so exciting to see.
He's just a next level director. And like we said, the four things, I know my two things were balancing intimacy and scale. And Nick, what were you two things that we have to stick with?
Character and like tension, but like also tension not necessarily always in like a uneasy way, but also just like you don't know what's gonna happen, which is like the best thing to come from it. Like you can't fully predict what's gonna happen. And like Bong Joon Ho does it well with like Snowpiercer and Parasite, and Villeneuve does it in his own way as well. And along with his character focus, he it'll be incredible. This is the conclusion of his phase one evolution right here. This is going to be like the test for really big testament to what he can do with Dune.
Hey man, I'm ready for it. But with that, that wraps up our spotlight of Denis Villeneuve. Let us know what you guys thought in the comment section down below. What's your favorite film of his? Is there a favorite scene you have? A favorite, like a special connection you have with one of his movies? Let us know. Let us know how excited you are about him directing Dune. We know it's probably finished by now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you next time.